My family demanded I give my loft, the one I built with my own hands, to my golden boy brother. When I refused, my mother slapped me at his wedding. They thought I'd break. Instead, I quietly gathered every lie, every secret, and prepared to burn their perfect world to the ground. The late afternoon sun slanted through the original arched windows of the old textile mill, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors of my loft. It was my favorite time of day. The light, thick and golden like honey, would catch the dust motes dancing in the air and illuminate the deep, rich grain of the reclaimed oak beams I'd spent 2 months restoring by hand. This place wasn't just an apartment. It was a statement. I'm an architect, and every square inch of this space was a page from my own private blueprint, a testament to a vision I'd nurtured since I was a kid sketching impossible houses in the margins of my notebooks. Everything else in my life felt like it had invisible strings attached, leading back to my family, to their expectations, their needs, their quiet disappointments. But this was mine. From the exposed brick walls I'd meticulously cleaned and sealed, to the custom-built steel staircase that spiraled up to the sleeping mezzanine, it was the one thing in my 32 years of life that was purely and unequivocally my own creation. It was my sanctuary, my sovereignty. The silence was broken by the buzz of my phone on the granite countertop. I glanced at the caller ID. Mom. A familiar, low-grade tension coiled in my gut. I took a breath and swiped to answer. Caleb, honey, how are you? Her voice was a little too bright, a little too cheerful, the way it always was when she was about to ask for something. I'm good, Mom. Just wrapping up some work. How are you? Oh, just frantic. Absolutely frantic. This wedding is going to be the end of me, she chirped, but there was a thrill in her voice. You should see the venue now that the flowers are in. It's a fairy tale. Your brother and Sarah deserve nothing less. I murmured something noncommittal. My brother, Leo, the golden boy, the one who could fail upwards with a charming smile and a shrug, always landing on a cushion provided by our parents. I'm so glad you're coming in for the whole weekend, she continued, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more serious, more intimate. It means so much to have the family together. You know, a wedding is a turning point. For everyone. There it was. That vague, loaded phrasing. Of course, Mom. I wouldn't miss it. I know, honey. It's just, oh, Caleb, you work so hard. All alone in that big place. It must get lonely, don't you think? I looked around my loft. The light, the space, the quiet. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I'm happy here, Mom. I know, she said, her voice softening into a purr of maternal concern. It was a tone I knew all too well. It was the prelude to a request. Just remember, family is for leaning on each other. Don't ever forget that. The call ended, but the silence she left behind was different. It was heavier, laced with a familiar, unspoken expectation. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city lights beginning to flicker to life. I had a bad feeling about this wedding, a feeling that my sanctuary was about to come under siege. The rehearsal dinner was held at a stuffy, old-money country club with dark wood paneling and oil paintings of stern-faced men on the walls. It smelled of lemon polish and privilege. I felt like I was wearing a costume, my simple navy blazer and gray trousers a stark contrast to the tailored suits and glittering dresses that filled the room. My family was holding court near the grand fireplace. My mother, radiant in a silk dress the color of champagne, was telling an animated story to a circle of aunts and uncles. My father stood beside her, a proud, indulgent smile on his face. And in the center of it all was Leo, my brother, looking every bit the conquering hero in a bespoke suit, his arm draped possessively around his fiancée, Sarah. I navigated the clusters of chattering relatives, offering polite smiles and enduring cheek pinches from aunts who still saw me as a sullen teenager. Caleb, there you are, my father boomed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. His attention, however, immediately snapped back to Leo. He cleared his throat, pulling a small, velvet-wrapped box from his pocket. I wanted to give you this tonight, son, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for the man who will carry on the family's legacy. He opened the box to reveal a gleaming, ludicrously expensive Swiss watch. The room erupted in oohs and ahs. Leo strapped it on, holding his wrist up to the light, a grin of pure, unadulterated entitlement spreading across his face. My father beamed. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. He turned to me then, his duty to the golden child fulfilled. He just nodded. Good to see you, Caleb. That was it. No gift, no grand pronouncement. Just a nod, the kind you give a doorman. I felt a familiar memory surface, sharp and unwelcome. I was 21, sweating in a bank office, co-signing the loan for Leo's disastrous business venture, the one he'd abandoned 6 months later, leaving me to deal with the collectors. I remember my dad's words then. Thanks for helping your brother out, Caleb. He's the ideas man. You've always been a practical one. Practical. It was their word for useful. Later, I found myself standing alone on the terrace, nursing a club soda. My mother drifted out to join me, her perfume preceding her. She looked at me, her head tilted, a look of what she probably thought was sympathy in her eyes. You're so quiet, honey. Just taking it all in, I said. She sighed, a soft, theatrical sound. I know you're different, Caleb. You have your own path. Your father, he doesn't always know how to show it, but he's proud of you too, in his own way. She patted my arm. We just worry about you. We want you to be part of the family, truly part of it. Her words were meant to be comforting, but they felt like a warning. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their control over me. As I looked past her at Leo, laughing as he showed off his new watch, I knew my role this weekend was already written. I was the supporting cast, the silent benefactor, the practical one, and I was expected to play my part. The wedding itself was an exercise in excess. A string quartet played Vivaldi as guests milled about a grand ballroom dripping with white orchids and crystal chandeliers. It was less a celebration of love and more a performance of wealth. I found a quiet corner, trying to make myself as small as possible, an observer of my own family's pageant. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, my mother found me. She glided over, her smile stretched a little too tight, her eyes scanning the room as she spoke. Leo and my father fell in a step behind her, a coordinated, practiced movement. It felt like an ambush. Caleb, darling, she purred, taking my arm. Can we have a word in private? A little family chat. She led us to a secluded alcove overlooking the manicured gardens. She began with a flourish, clasping her hands together. This day is such a blessing. Elda has found such a promising young man, and we just feel, well, this could be a turning point for everyone. Leo stood beside her, smug and expectant. My father stared out at the fountains, his expression unreadable, already disconnected. I waited. I knew this wasn't about blessings. My mother looked directly at me, her eyes glistening with fake affection. And then she dropped the bomb. We were thinking, Caleb, your loft, it's just so large for one person. You're always working, you're single. It would be the most wonderful, selfless thing, a truly meaningful wedding gift. For Isolde and Oliver to start their new life in a home like that. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I'd had a bad feeling, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. They weren't asking for a contribution. They were asking for my home, my sanctuary, the one thing that was mine. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I'm sorry, what? Her smile didn't waver. Think of it, honey. A gift from a brother to his sister. What a story that would make. It's what families do. It's a great idea, man. Leo chimed in, nudging me with his elbow. We have you over for dinner all the time. I turned to my father. He refused to meet my gaze, still fascinated by the damn fountains. His silence was his consent. They had rehearsed this. The thought was sickening. For a split second, a lifetime of conditioning kicked in. The desire to keep the peace, to be the good son, to just give them what they wanted so the tension would stop. Just say yes, a voice in my head whispered. Just give in. It's easier. I could almost feel the word forming on my lips. I could see their relieved smiles, feel the condescending pat on my back. But then I saw an image of my loft. The afternoon sun on the floor. The scent of sawdust and fresh coffee. The quiet pride. My quiet pride. And something inside me, something I thought had been buried long ago, snapped into place. It was my spine. I looked my mother dead in the eye. No. The word was quiet, but it landed in the space between us with the force of a wrecking ball. The answer is no. I repeated, my voice colder now, harder. That place is mine. The change in my mother's face was instantaneous. The mask of benevolent matriarch didn't just crack. It shattered, revealing something ugly and venomous underneath. Her eyes narrowed. Her perfectly painted lips curled into a snarl. "What did you say?" she hissed, her voice dropping its syrupy sweetness. "I said no," I replied, holding her gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. "You selfish, ungrateful boy," she shrieked, her voice rising, sharp enough to cut through the muffled chatter of the party. A few nearby guests froze, champagne flutes halfway to their lips. Heads turned, and then it happened. Her hand moved in a blur. The slap wasn't a dainty, theatrical tap. It was a hard, stinging crack of palm against cheek, fueled by pure, undiluted rage. My head snapped to the side, the force of it shocking me. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden, ringing silence of the alcove. For a long moment, nobody moved. The world seemed to slow down. I could feel the heat blooming on my skin, a five-fingered brand of her fury. But the physical sting was nothing compared to the searing humiliation. I slowly turned my head back to face them. I looked past my mother's heaving chest and contorted face. I looked at my brother, Leo. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't horrified. He was smirking, a small, triumphant twitch at the corner of his mouth that said, "I knew you didn't have it in you." I win. I looked at my father. He finally tore his eyes away from the garden, his expression a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment. He cleared his throat and muttered the words that would be etched in my memory forever. "This isn't about you, Caleb. This isn't about you." The words hit me harder than the slap. My home, my life, my dignity, none of it was about me. I was just a supporting character in the grand drama of their lives, a prop to be used and discarded. Something broke inside me then, but it wasn't my spirit. It was the illusion, the desperate, lifelong hope that one day, if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, they would finally see me. I saw them clearly now for the first time. I saw the greed, the entitlement, the breathtaking cruelty. And I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, quiet, empty thing. The kind of smile a man gives when he's just read the final page of a book he should have burned a long, long time ago. I felt the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and even in my ears. The ringing had stopped. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. Without another word, I straightened my blazer. I turned my back on their shocked faces, on my mother's open mouth, my brother's fading smirk, my father's cowardice. I walked out of the alcove and back into the party. The whispers followed me like a cloud of insects. I ignored them. I walked straight to a passing waiter, took a flute of champagne from his tray, held it without drinking, and proceeded directly towards the exit, my steps measured and deliberate. Each click of my shoes on the marble floor was a punctuation mark at the end of a chapter. The chapter of me, the good son. That book was now permanently closed. The drive back to my loft was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine and the sound of the tires on the wet pavement. My cheek throbbed with a dull, persistent heat, a physical reminder of the evening's events. But my mind was unervingly clear, as if the slap had knocked all the sentimental fog out of my head. Back in the quiet refuge of my home, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the darkness to the large windows and stood there, looking out at the glittering, indifferent city. I wasn't a victim. A victim is powerless. And for the first time in my life, I felt the opposite of powerless. I thought of my grandmother, Evelyn. She had been the only one who saw me, the real me, beyond my utility to the family. She'd passed away 2 years ago, and the void she left had never truly been filled. I walked to the old, sea-worn wooden chest she'd left me, its brass fittings cool beneath my fingertips. I knelt and lifted the heavy lid. The scent of cedar and old paper filled the air. Beneath a stack of her old photo albums and a neatly folded cashmere scarf, there was a thick manila envelope, sealed with wax, with my name written on it in her elegant, familiar script. For when you need it most, she had told me, her eyes knowing sad. I hope you never do. Tonight, I needed it. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside were 2 documents and a letter. The first document was a notarized copy of her second will, dated just 3 months before she died. The second was the original, fully executed deed to this very loft, transferred completely and legally into my name, free and clear, on that same date. Then I unfolded the letter. The paper was soft, the ink slightly faded. My dearest Caleb, it began. If you are reading this, it means they have finally pushed you too far. I am so sorry. I saw the way they treated you, my quiet, steady boy. They mistook your kindness for weakness. They saw your self-sufficiency not as a strength, but as a resource to be tapped. They will never change. That is why I did this. This place is yours, not as a gift to be held over your head, but as your right. I bought this property through a trust years ago, intending for it to be your foundation, a place they could never touch. The deed is done. It is legally, morally, and spiritually yours. There is also a savings account detailed on the back of this letter. I hid it for you. Use it to protect yourself. Use it to build your life on your terms. Remember, Caleb, you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your love is not a debt to be repaid. You are stronger than you know. You're the architect of your own life. Don't let them tear down what you have built. All my love, always, Grandma Evelyn. I sank to the floor, the documents clutched in my hand, and for the first time that night, tears streamed down my face. They weren't tears of humiliation or anger. They were tears of profound, gut-wrenching relief, of validation. Someone had seen me. Someone had loved me, not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. She had given me more than a home and some money. She had given me armor. She had given me a blueprint for the war to come. I sat there on the cold floor for an hour, the city lights blurring through my tears. Then I stood up. I walked to my desk, my movements deliberate. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the business card tucked into the envelope. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Davison. Mr. Davison, I said, my own voice steady and clear. This is Caleb Vance, Evelyn's grandson. I think it's time we talked. The days after the wedding were strangely silent. No angry calls, no pleading texts. It was an unnerving quiet, the kind that precedes a storm. I spent the time meeting with Mr. Davison, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer in his late 60s who had been my grandmother's fierce advocate for decades. We cataloged the documents. We verified the deed. We prepared. The first move from their side came on Tuesday afternoon. It was a call from my building's management office. Mr. Vance? This is Deborah from the front office. Just calling to confirm, we've received a request to add Mr. Leonard Vance to your unit's resident file and to issue him a key fob. It says he's moving in. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, washed over me. They weren't going to let this go. They were just going to bypass me entirely. Do not authorize that, Deborah, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I did not make that request. No changes are to be made to my file. Understood. Oh, yes, of course, sir. My apologies. It looked official. I hung up, my mind racing. A key fob? Then a memory hit me, a ghost from 4 years ago. Leo, crashing in my old apartment after another dramatic breakup, had said, Hey man, I made myself a spare key. Hope that's cool. You know, for emergencies. I'd forgotten all about it. He hadn't. That evening, I dove into my building's online portal. I pulled up the access logs for my unit. And there it was. 2:03 p.m. today. Side elevator. Key fob duplicate detected. Access denied. They'd already tried to get in. My blood ran cold. This was no longer just a demand. It was an active siege. I moved through my loft, room by room. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I checked the small, unassuming drawer where I kept spare keys for the mailbox and gym. The mailbox key was gone. They must have swiped it the last time Leo was here. Just as the pieces were clicking into place, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin, Mark. He was one of the quiet ones in the family, an observer. The text contained a single screenshot. It was a picture of the marble column lobby of my building, taken from an artful, side-on angle. The caption, dripping with smug satisfaction, read, getting settled into our beautiful new home. So blessed. The post was from Sarah, my new sister-in-law. It was on her private, close friend's Instagram story. Mark had been on that list. I sat down at my dining table, the screenshot glowing on my phone screen. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just tried to get in. They were already publicly claiming my home as their own, trying to create a narrative, a social reality that would make their claims seem legitimate. I felt a surge of anger, so pure and hot it almost made me dizzy. But I pushed it down. Anger was messy. I needed to be methodical. I needed to be an architect. I took a screenshot of the access log. I took a photo of the empty space where the mailbox key used to be. I saved the image Mark had sent me. I created a new folder on my computer. I named it Project Restoration. I attached the files to a new email to Mr. Davison. Subject: Urgent. Evidence of attempted unlawful entry and public misrepresentation. I hit send. Then I stood up and made myself a cup of strong, black coffee. They thought I was wounded, licking my wounds in silence. They were wrong. I was building a case. And every move they made was just another brick in the fortress I was constructing around myself. "They're clumsy," Mr. Davison said, his voice a dry rustle over the phone the next morning. "Arrogant people are always clumsy. They believe their own narrative so completely they don't think to cover their tracks." Following his advice, I spent the morning fortifying my position. I had the building's security manager deactivate all previous key fobs associated with my unit. I upgraded my door lock to a biometric system, fingerprint and facial recognition only. Paranoia? No, it was protection. You don't leave your door unlocked when you know someone has a key. 2 days later, the official response to Mr. Davison's initial, polite letter of inquiry arrived. It wasn't a phone call. It was a legal courier standing at my door with a thick, intimidating envelope from the law firm of Gene Latimer and Partners. My Uncle Gene, my mother's younger brother, a man who called himself a real estate shark and wore too much cologne. Inside, on heavy, cream-colored stationery, was a formal demand letter. It accused me of unlawful occupation of a property intended for the familial estate of Leonard Vance. It demanded I vacate the premises within 7 business days or face litigation. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the letter was a photocopy of a document that made my stomach turn. It was a will, a new will. It was supposedly signed by my grandmother, Evelyn, dated just 1 month before the massive stroke that had ultimately taken her life. This version named my brother, Leo, as the sole heir to the condominium property. The signature at the bottom was a scarily accurate forgery of my grandmother's elegant script. I just stared at it. My grandmother hated messes. She alphabetized her spice rack. The idea that she would create such a chaotic, contradictory legal situation was unthinkable. This was a fabrication, a brazen, disgusting lie. I was on the phone with Mr. Davison within minutes, my voice tight with a rage I was struggling to contain. I emailed him a scan of the documents. He called me back a half hour later. "Caleb," he said, and I could almost hear him smiling. "They've just handed us the gun they planned to shoot themselves with." "What do you mean?" "The notary stamp on this forgery. The notary's name is a former paralegal of your uncle's. A quick search shows she left his firm under a cloud of suspicion 2 years ago. More importantly, I have a signed, dated affidavit from your grandmother's primary care physician, Dr. Alquist, stating that on the date this forgery was supposedly signed, your grandmother was with him in his office, and he judged her to be in a confused state and not of sound mind to sign any legal documents. He was so concerned he made a formal note in her file." He paused, letting it sink in. "They've committed fraud, Caleb. Provable, documented fraud." An hour later, we drafted our response. It was simple. We didn't argue. We didn't threaten. We attached a certified copy of the legitimate, prior-dated deed. We attached a copy of the doctor's affidavit. And then I added my own personal touch. I took a yellow sticky note, and in my clearest architectural lettering, I wrote 2 words. I stuck it right on the face of the forged will. "Try again." We sent the package via certified mail directly to my Uncle Gene's office. As I walked back from the post office, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a chess match, and they had just made a catastrophic, illegal move. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was dismantling their entire, rotten enterprise, piece by piece. Their next attack was more insidious. It came not with a legal threat, but with a community-based assault on my character. A week after we sent our try again package, I received a formal summons via email. Subject: Formal Complaint Review, HOA Board Meeting. The email detailed a list of complaints filed against my unit. Unauthorized alterations to the balcony. I hadn't touched it. Violations of the noise ordinance on dates I was verifiably out of town. And the most bizarre of all, endangering local pets with unfamiliar substances on my patio. It was a coordinated smear campaign designed to paint me as a problem resident, a nuisance, to pressure me from another angle. The meeting was in 2 days. I saw my mother's and Leo's fingerprints all over it. They had clearly rallied their friends in the building, including, I was sure, the current HOA president, a man who played golf with my father. I spent the next 48 hours not in a state of panic, but in deep, focused preparation. I was an architect preparing for a critical presentation to a hostile city planning commission. I compiled my evidence. I arranged it into a clean, logical sequence. I didn't prepare a speech. I prepared a case. The HOA boardroom was an intimate, intimidating space. The long mahogany table was surrounded by the 7 board members. As I'd suspected, the president, Mr. Riley, greeted me with a cool, dismissive air. My mother and Leo were also present, sitting behind the board members, looking concerned and virtuous. They were there as the aggrieved parties. Mr. Riley opened the meeting. We're here to discuss a number of serious complaints lodged against Mr. Vance. We will allow Mr. Vance to respond. He said it with the tone of a man merely going through a formality before delivering a guilty verdict. I didn't rise. I simply placed my laptop on the table and connected it to the large screen on the wall. Thank you, Mr. Riley, I said calmly. I won't take up much of your time. Instead of a response, I'd like to present a brief structural analysis of the filed complaints. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. Project, Complaint Review, Unit 7B Architect, Caleb Vance. A murmur went through the room. My mother shifted uncomfortably. I moved through the slides with cold, professional precision. Slide 2. Noise Complaint, October 12th. I displayed the complaint log next to my airline e-ticket and hotel receipt from a business trip to Chicago on that exact date. Slide 3. Unauthorized alteration, balcony. I showed the original architectural plans for the building, which I had on file, next to a current, time-stamped photo of my balcony. They were identical. No alterations had been made, I stated flatly. Slide 4. Endangerment of pets. I presented a receipt from a professional, pet-safe, organic pest control service I had used 2 months prior. Then I showed a text message from Leo, dated 3 weeks ago. Hey man, Sarah's allergies are acting up. Do you have any of that strong bug spray you used to use at the lake house? Slide 5. Pattern of harassment. This was the centerpiece. I displayed a chart. On one side, a timeline of every complaint filed against me. On the other, a timeline of my legal correspondence with my family's lawyer. The correlation was perfect, undeniable. Final slide, conclusion. The screen showed a single sentence. The complaints lack structural integrity and appear to be a bad faith effort to exert extra-legal pressure in an ongoing property dispute. I finished and looked at the board. The room was utterly silent. Mr. Riley's face had gone from smug to pale. My mother was staring at her hands. Leo was looking at the exit. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made accusations. I had simply presented the data. I had used my own professional language to build a coffin and nail them inside it. Mr. Riley cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. The board finds these complaints to be without merit. This matter is closed. We apologize for your time, Mr. Vance. My mother and Leo stood up and practically fled the room. I packed up my laptop slowly. I had walked into their trap, and I had turned it into a public exhibition of their lies. The victory at the HOA meeting was satisfying, but I knew it wasn't the end. They were cornered, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. I needed a final, undeniable checkmate. It arrived 2 days later in an email from my cousin Mark. Subject: you need to hear this. The body of the email was empty, save for a single audio file. My heart hammered against my ribs as I double-clicked it. The recording was tinny, clearly made on a phone tucked away in a pocket. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the low murmur of a dinner party, a family dinner I had been too busy to attend a few months back. Then I heard my Aunt Cora's voice. He's just so stubborn about that loft. It's not right. Then my mother's voice, clear as a bell, casual and conspiratorial. We just have to apply the right kind of pressure. At the wedding, in front of everyone. Make him feel like he's ruining the family's big day if he says no. A chuckle. It was Leo. Exactly. Guilt him. He's desperate for approval. He always folds if you make it feel personal. He can't stand being the bad guy. My mother again. He'll make a scene, maybe, but he'll sign it over eventually to make it all stop. He always does. The recording ended. I sat there, frozen, in the silence of my loft. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel shock. I felt a profound, hollowing emptiness. It wasn't just a plan hatched in a moment of greed. It was a calculated, psychological assault built on a lifetime of observing my weaknesses, my desires, my need to be loved. They knew me, and they had weaponized that knowledge against me. I listened to it again, and again, until their casual, cruel words were burned into my brain. This wasn't just a recording. This was the truth. It was the foundation of their entire world, and I was about to play it for everyone to hear. I opened my calendar and looked for the next big family gathering. An anniversary brunch for my grandparents. Perfect. It was time for the final performance. The anniversary brunch was held in the private dining room of a sunlit restaurant. The whole clan was there, aunts, uncles, cousins from out of state. The air was thick with forced pleasantries and the scent of hollandaise sauce. When I walked in, a hush fell over the room. I was the ghost at the feast. My mother rushed over, her face a mask of concern. "Caleb, we were so worried. We haven't heard from you." I didn't answer. I just walked past her and took an empty seat at the long table. The meal began. The chatter resumed, though it was strained. I waited. I waited until everyone had their food, until the mimosas had been poured. I waited for the precise moment of peak civility. Then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and placed it in the center of the table. I pressed play. The tinny sound of their own voices filled the room. Make him feel like he's ruining the family's big day. He's desperate for approval. He always folds. Forks paused midair. Glasses froze halfway to lips. The casual chatter died instantly, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. I watched their faces. My Uncle Gene's jaw tightened. My aunt from Florida stared, her eyes wide with horror. My mother's face went white as a sheet. Leo looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. When the recording ended, nobody spoke. The only sound was the clatter of a fork dropping onto a plate. My uncle, the one who had always called me ungrateful, slowly turned to my mother. "You said that? About your own son?" My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found only shocked and disgusted faces. "You have to understand," she finally stammered. We just wanted—" "Don't," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "No explanation is necessary. The truth speaks for itself." I stood up, slid my phone back into my pocket, and looked around the table one last time. I didn't feel anger or triumph. I just felt done. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to drown in the silence they had created. The foundation of their perfect family image had been demolished, and I was the one who had pushed the detonator. I spent the next day in a state of quiet decompression. The war was over. The truth was out. I expected silence, and for the most part, that's what I got. Until Sunday evening. There was a hesitant knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and was shocked to see Sarah, my brother's new wife, standing in the hallway. She looked pale and drawn, a world away from the beaming bride from the wedding photos. I opened the door. "Caleb," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly in the center of my living room, clutching a large envelope to her chest like a shield. "I'm not here to apologize for them," she began, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the space they had tried so hard to steal. "I'm here because I was a fool." She opened the envelope and pulled out a sheaf of papers. I didn't know how bad it was. Not really. After that brunch, I went looking. She handed me the papers. They were printed text messages between Leo and my mother, planning everything in lurid detail. But there was something else. A document that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a copy of her prenup with Leo. She pointed to a highlighted clause. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until I found it. Asset Schedule B, Future and Expected Inheritances. Item 1. The condominium property located at 7B, King Street Lofts, to be transferred to the marital estate post-nuptially via a familial gifting agreement. They had put my home in their prenup, before the wedding, before they had even asked me. It was a done deal in their minds. I confronted him, Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. He said it was a sure thing, that you were just holding on to it for him. Her eyes met mine. I saw how you handled that board meeting. You don't play games. You just lay out the facts until the other side has nowhere to go. I'm not going down with that sinking ship. She took a deep breath. I'm having my lawyer strike this clause, and I'll testify to all of it if you need me to. I just want out. I looked from her terrified face to the document in my hand. It was the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. The ultimate proof of their premeditated greed. I simply nodded. Thank you, Sarah. She left as quietly as she came. I didn't feel any pleasure in her fear, but there was a cold clarity. The last pillar of their fraudulent world had just crumbled. After Sarah left, the silence in my loft felt different. It wasn't empty. It felt clean. It was a blank slate. Later that night, my phone vibrated. A single voicemail. I didn't need to see the number. I knew. I hesitated for a moment, then pressed play. My mother's voice, the one she used when she was trying to reel me back in, filled the room. It was soft, laced with a manufactured sorrow. "Caleb, honey, I think we've all had enough drama, don't you? This has gone too far. You're tearing the family apart. Just let it go. Come home. We can talk." I listened to the carefully chosen words. Tearing the family apart. As if the family wasn't already a fractured, dysfunctional facade. As if I was the aggressor, and not the one who had been pushed to the absolute brink. Her softness wasn't love. It was control, dressed up in a flimsy costume of maternal concern. It was the same old song. This time, I didn't even feel the urge to sing along. I listened to it one more time, letting every manipulative syllable wash over me, powerless. Then, with a simple, deliberate tap of my thumb, I deleted it. It was the final act of clearing the debris. The next morning, I drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove until I found myself heading up the winding road to the city overlook, the place my grandmother used to go for quiet. The wind was cool and clean up here, the late afternoon sun laying golden streaks across the hillside. The city spread out below me, a miniature world, distant and peaceful. I sat on the wooden bench that faced the view, the same bench Grandma and I had shared so many times. I didn't need to read her letter again. I knew the words by heart. You are the architect of your own life. I used to think my silence was weakness, a failure to fight back. For years it was, but the silence I now felt was different. It was a choice. It was the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needed to seek approval from those who would never grant it. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't shamed them for the sake of cruelty. I hadn't burned the bridges. I had simply stopped crossing them and watched them collapse under the weight of their own lies. To them, that was the ultimate betrayal. But to me, for the first time in my life, it felt like freedom. I looked out at the vast expanse of the city, at the endless grid of streets and buildings, of lives being lived. I took out a small moleskine notebook from my jacket, the kind I always carried for architectural ideas. I opened it to a fresh page. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about legal defenses or counteroffensives. With a steady hand, I began to sketch. It wasn't a building. It was the rough outline of a new life. My life, built on a foundation of truth, with walls of hard-earned peace and wide-open windows facing the future. They had given me my first lesson in demolition. Now it was time to build.